The term open world does not necessarily refer to a living, breathing game world, but rather to a more non-linear approach to level design and player interaction with the environment. When you play Final Fantasy X, you and your party will travel through the monster-infested Mian high roads, battling tough foes along the way. You move in a straight line from point A to point B until you reach the end. In contrast, in the most recent Final Fantasy XV, you and your party can take on main game missions or side quests at your leisure. You can take the time to go off the beaten path, both literally and metaphorically, and play the game your way. This can greatly benefit the player as they can now choose to take on a difficult mission after leveling up, rather than feeling stuck and unable to defeat a difficult boss. Open-world games are frequently associated with games that feature literal wide-open worlds, such as the featured cities in the Grand Theft Auto franchise and the rich world of the Witcher series. Open-world games have a much longer history than you might think. Many gamers, I believe, were introduced to one of the most famous open worlds, Liberty City in Grand Theft Auto 3 in 2001. What if I told you the first modern open-world video game was released in the mid-1970s? Of course, there are classics such as the first Legend of Zelda title, in which the player controls Link through the wilderness, ultimately deciding where their adventure takes them. There was Dungeons & Dragons before Zelda. Over the years, open-world games have come a long way. These massive innovations completely transformed the genre. Though they have existed for much longer, open-world games have proven to be one of the most popular video game genres in the last decade. They excel at allowing the player to experience a game at their own pace, allowing a wider audience to enjoy it. Some of the most popular video game franchises are predominantly open world and can be found on Game Pass. But as with everything else, they did not appear out of nowhere. These types of games have evolved over time, with new ideas and innovations added on top of what came before. Many times, these games have jumped ahead and forever changed the open world genre. 10. 3D. The technology of the time constrained the earliest open world games. Tato's Western Gun, released in 1975, was the first open world game. It was two-dimensional. Players had a whole new way of experiencing their games with the addition of 3D. Beginning with Mercenary in 1985, the incorporation of 3D became increasingly popular. What made it appealing was the sense of depth and verticality it added to games, allowing designers and gamers to discover and interact with far more possibilities. 9. NPC timetables. NPCs are a necessary component of any open-world game. Just look at Fallout 76. They breathe life into the world that the developer is creating. In many games, these NPCs would simply stand around waiting for the player to approach and interact with them. They failed to come across as people who lived in that area or on that land. That's when NPC schedules came into play. NPCs suddenly developed their own distinct cycles that they would follow day after day, taking them to various locations and engaging in various activities. The player was no longer conversing with a stranger in the middle of a field. Instead, they were conversing with a farmer who was tending to that field in the middle of the day and would eat dinner later that day at the pub. They can even assist the player if certain conditions are met. 8. Towers. There is no denying that towers abound in modern open-world games. They are an effective way to encourage the player to explore so that they can see more of the world map. While many people have grown tired of this mechanic, there are still games that take it and give it a new spin. In Breath of the Wild, for example, the player can use towers to manually scout the surrounding area or as jumping-off points for their glider. It takes on a more complex role. Towers will remain an important part of the open-world formula as long as these reimaginings continue. 7. Opponent bases. The concept of the enemy base is more iconic than any other aspect of the open-world sandbox. This occurs in both well-known and unknown open-world games. It can be approached in any manner desired by the player, whether stealth, loud, or somewhere in between. It embodies what developers strive for in a sandbox environment: player freedom. Some bases can be conquered by eliminating all enemies on sight, while others require the player to simply destroy everything of value. These are just a few examples of the concept. Despite its dubious overuse, the concept of the enemy base remains influential and captivating to players. 6. Glider, advanced movement. As with any open-world game, the player will spend a significant amount of time traversing it. Depending on the size of the world, this could take quite some time. To make this aspect of the game more enjoyable, the developers devised alternate modes of transportation. The glider has recently become a more popular option. Simply leap from a high vantage point and watch your character cover vast fields of land in seconds. Beyond gliders, advanced mobility options exist in a variety of forms. consider the parkour system in Prototype. Anything to make the journey from point A to point B more bearable. 5. Interaction in PvP. Most open-world games revolve around the player's interactions with other players. However, with the addition of multiplayer elements, the dynamic shifted dramatically. Games like DayZ paved the way for players to interact with one another either as allies or enemies. The tense uncertainty of these collisions made these games stand out significantly and allowed for some of the most unique interactions a person could have in a game. Of course, there was cooperation, but the addition of team killing made it rather scarce. 4. SANDBOXES emergent gameplay. In the early days of the open-world genre, the player's options were extremely limited. Normally, any given situation could only be approached in a very specific way, or the player would fail or be unable to progress. Then there was the sandbox. Players can now solve problems in ways that the developer never imagined. For example, when a random tiger attacks a patrol after the player throws bait into the road, or when a supply drop is dropped on an unsuspecting enemy's head. The possibilities expanded dramatically. 3. Quick travel. As open-world games grew in size, developers needed a way for players to traverse the map in a timely manner. The fast travel system allows a player to return to previous locations, reducing backtracking time to a bare minimum. The developer could use this to artificially increase the game's pace without having to reduce the game's size. For those who prefer to explore these vast landscapes at their leisure, everything between these fast travel points is still available for the player to discover at their leisure. 2. Factions. Many players in open-world games want to feel as if they have entered a living, breathing world. One way developers have accomplished this is by incorporating a faction system. Each faction would have their own territory and way of carrying themselves. The player is then free to do whatever they want with these factions, but the spark of conflict piques the average player's interest, drawing them deeper into the world. Players can sometimes even help shape the world by assisting these factions, leading to great story moments both intentional and unintentional. There is optimism that the upcoming Starfield will build on what Skyrim began. 1. Procedural development. Many players were left wondering about the efficacy of procedural generation in an open-world design after No Man's Sky. However, when done correctly, the prospect of procedural generation becomes enticing, opening up more possibilities than anyone could have imagined. It makes every interaction a player has with a given world unique to them, which appeals to a large portion of the gaming population. This concept in relation to open worlds is still rather rudimentary, but the potential that exists within it has the potential to forever change the face of the open world genre. The creator of the world's most popular battle royale, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, has launched his own production company, PlayerUnknown Productions. Green's goal with this studio is to create worlds and experiences rather than games. The studio is set up to explore, experiment, and create new technologies, pipelines, and gameplay, according to the homepage of their official website, and Green is quick to demonstrate his dedication to this goal by revealing a tech demon called Prologue. Green posted a video on Twitter detailing his plans for the studio's future and how he hopes to provide for the community, as well as details on the first product that the studio will release, Prologue. Prologue is billed as an open-world survival tech demo that showcases the capabilities of their new terrain generation tools. Prologue will present you with a goal and the means to achieve it by acquiring survival-based tools. The real kicker is that Prologue is supposed to have the most expansive world space possible with current technology. Your computer is supposed to interact with the game's network via distributed networking using machine learning, allowing the world space to be generated. The key to making things bigger than humans can create on their own is to get machines to pitch in and help, Green said. Our machine is a neural network, and our network allows us to learn and then generate massive realistic open worlds in real time. If you enjoyed viewing the show, we would appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to it by clicking the button labeled Subscribe. Make sure the notification button is activated so that you are kept abreast of all of the newest videos that we upload.